Okay, so let's take a look at our drum session. Okay, we got a pair of kick drums, snare top and bottom, and I got a rack tom and a floor tom, hi-hat. We got our overheads panned out. Now this mono capture mic and a stereo room. Okay, so we got everything. We got a basic panning structure, gain structure, set some levels. So we got a pretty good sound going here with the drum kit. So now we're going to add in some compression. So I'm going to import some aux tracks from my mix template. They have some compressors ready to go. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so we have our two kick drum mics going to a kick bus, and this mono aux is getting a DBX160. And we have our two snare top and bottom mics going to a mono snare bus, also getting a DBX160. And then we have our toms left and tom right, or rack and floor. Those are going to a stereo toms bus, which is also getting the DBX160. Very clearly, I love this compressor on individual drum elements, kick, snare, and toms. This is the Waves version. I've used the UAD version for many, many years. Gravitated to this one lately because it has the mix knob, so we can get a parallel sound. It also has a high-pass filter on the side chain, which can be useful if you want to filter out any low end to the detector circuit. We're not going to engage that today. We are going to start with this at a 50-50 blend, and we'll go to 100 just to hear for a comparison. And so this is the DBX160 on the kick drum. Aside from the obvious level differences in the 50-50 blend to the 100% compressed blend, definitely that full-on 160 sound. It's a very distinct sound, and you get that when you put this all the way up to 100%. But I find that I like to do a 50-50 parallel on it because you get a little bit more of the original sound of the kick drum and get that sort of blended in, that character and that tone of the 160 compressor. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at a very similar situation here with the snare drum. So again, this is just a default setting, 4-to-1 threshold set on the default setting, and we have about 5 dBs of makeup gain. So we're going to take a look at this, start on a 50-50 blend, pull it up to 100, and listen to the DBX160 on the snare drum. Okay, great. So it's the sound of the snare drum, just a little bit more of it. Okay, let's take a look at the toms. Now, the only difference with this, because this is a stereo bus, we have this in multi-mono mode. So it's actually two compressors. They have identical settings, but since we have the two separate detectors, when we have one tom hit on one side of the stereo field, it's not affecting the compressor on the other side of the stereo field and vice versa. So let's take a look though at the sound of the DBX160 on the toms. Okay, so with the hard gating on the toms, you could maybe hear a little bit more of what this compressor does to the transient and to the sustain. So that's the DBX 160 on the toms. Okay, moving down the line, we have an overhead bus. Now, not only is this getting the 2 overhead mics, but we're also feeding our hi-hat mic, which again, not a lot, minus 13, 14 on the fader. So we're not sending a lot of it. This is going to a Neve 33609. Pretty gentle setting, 2-to-1 ratio, the magic 100 millisecond recovery time. The limiter is completely off, and we're just doing a little bit of makeup gain. And this is going to just give us a nice overall picture of the drum kit. And tonal-wise, I really like what this does to the low end, because obviously you're going to have some low-end kick drum, tom, snare information in your overheads. And they can cause phasing issues and different things with your individual mics. So I really like the way this 33609 sort of gets the low end in line and makes it very manageable. And I find that it just plays well with the rest of the drum kit. So let's take a listen to this. Okay, so moving down, we have a rooms bus. And again, we are sending this mono capture mic into that bus as well. So similar idea to the overheads. And this, we're giving a little bit of a slower compressor. This is the Fairchild 670 from UAD. This is the legacy version, so just the emulation of the compressor circuit. Reason I'm liking this on this track is the room physically was a small room. So this slower, longer compressor can give me a way to extend those transients and maybe create the feeling of a larger room than what actually was the case. So we're going to take a listen to this on our room bus. Okay, and now for context, I'm going to put this in, all the tracks in, and I will mute and unmute the room bus so we can get a sense of what this is adding in terms of the depth of the kit. So it gives you a sense of the Fairchild on our room mics. Okay, so last but not least, we have all of these buses and tracks going into a drum bus, which is passing on to our mix bus. Now, on the drum bus, we have a very familiar API 2500. I have this set with a medium threshold and a medium in the thrust circuit, feedback on the old type, 3 millisecond attack, 4-to-1 ratio, and a 0.1 second release. So very sort of standard setting for this compressor, and we're going to hear what this does to our drum bus. So I really like this on the drum bus. I try to keep it with about 2 to 3 dBs of gain reduction. So that's something I have to start to watch as I add in these other compressors. And what we're going to look at next is we're going to look at some parallel compression. Last but not least, we have two parallel compression chains. We have a mono kick snare crush and we have a stereo drum crush. So the kick snare crush, pretty self-explanatory. If we go up to the sends and we look at the kick and snare bus, those are both going to the kick snare crush. So we have an 1176 with a pretty aggressive setting, and we are going to bring this and blend this up into our mix. Okay, so there we go. We have the kick snare crush. Next, we're going to look at the drum crush. And on this, we have the plus 10 dB compressor, which is the plug-in version of the Compex compressor. Not a super common piece, but it does have a reputation of being a very great drum parallel compressor. That's what I check this plugin out to do, and I've been really, really happy with the results. And again, I'm sending this from my room bus, my overhead bus, tom bus, snare, and kick bus, and I have everything set to 0, which means it's getting an exact copy of the mix that we're hearing of the individual elements. It's getting an exact copy of that mix. Something I might play with later, but right now we're just going to stick with that balance, and we're going to fold this in, and here we go. Okay, so that is the plus 10 dB Compex compressor plugin. So you can see as we're going here, one thing I want to caution you is we did add quite a bit of level. So I'm going to have to go back to my bus compressor now, my drum bus compressor, and look at so we see now the peaks, transients are hitting, and we're getting a little bit more compression than I wanted. So I'm gonna actually push this up quite a bit. That sounds pretty good to my ears. So there you go, some examples of how to use compressors on your drum tracks.